Hello, I'm Kathy Chambers. Welcome to Authentically Cyber. If you are thinking about majoring in cybersecurity, or maybe you're in a completely different career and you're ready to switch over to cyber, or you've been in cybersecurity for a while and you're ready to take on a leadership role, this is the episode for you. I got a chance to sit down with Helen Patton. Now, Helen is a cybersecurity executive and CISO who was gracious enough to spend some time with us to give us the knowledge and tips and advice we need to have a successful cybersecurity career. In fact, she has written 2 books on it, and we're going to talk about that today. Let's go. Hello, Helen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me today.
It's perfect timing to have you here today because I was just talking before we started recording to you about the job market in 2026, and you have written 2 books, Navigating the Cybersecurity Career Path and Switching to Cyber. Both of those are super timely topics in the economy that we're in today. So let's just kind of lay the groundwork. Where, from your professional opinion, how do you think the job market is doing right now?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on what industry you want to work in and what kind of cybersecurity job you want to do. Right now, the tech sector, for example, is really tough. There's a lot of churn that's going on in tech, whereas government sector, maybe even healthcare, financial sector, they're a little calmer than the tech sector. So there's that. And I think as we think about the impact of AI on all jobs, but particularly cybersecurity jobs, I'm not seeing AI replace headcount, but I'm definitely seeing changes to the way they expect the job to be done and the expectation that you will know how to incorporate AI into the work that you do. So for some people, being able to incorporate AI into a job they thought they knew has been a difficult challenge. And for people who are trying to get into the industry, when they go to people who are in cyber and say, okay, well, what do I need to know? The answer right now is no one's really sure.
Which is why you wrote 2 books. So both of your books, the first one takes people through the entire journey, right? Whether you're just starting out mid-career level. The second book, Switching, is that transitioning from one career into cyber? Is that the focus of
Yes.
that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely for people who aren't in cyber already, but who, let's call them cyber curious, and they're sort of wondering what it's going to take to get there and whether it's the right career path for them at all. But also giving a nod to, look, if you've already done 10 years in some other kind of profession, telling you to go back to school and start doing internships and start doing an entry-level job is just not feasible. So how do you make a sideways move into a kind of role that's going to recognize the work you've already done? That's a different kind of path. And so that's why I ended up writing both books.
All right. I like that path. Let's start with that path, only because selfishly, I know a lot of people who are literally coming out of one industry and going into cyber.
Right.
So what are some of the first things they should consider before taking that leap?
Always start with, why are you choosing to even look at cyber in the first place? Like, being very clear on what you think the cyber industry is going to offer you that you find interesting. For some people, it is about building trust in technology systems. For some people, they've had a family member who's been defrauded by some online scammer and they want to help that kind of person. Like, there's a really broad range of ways of doing cyber. And when I mentor people and I ask them this question, sometimes it's just, well, it looks interesting, but you're going to have to be a little bit more explicit than that if people are going to help you to get into the profession. So one, start with why. I think the other thing to be thoughtful of is, what kinds of skills might you bring from the role you were in before? So we see a lot of people who come out of the military, for example, who have a lot of experience in emergency response kinds of activities. I know I'm generalizing really badly here, but bear with me. They might do well going into some kind of detection, response, recovery parts of cybersecurity. Then, on the other hand, we might have somebody who perhaps was a lawyer or a compliance officer, not in cyber, but just some other sort of adjacent field, moving sideways into cyber law or privacy and compliance could be a really easy sideways path to go. But if somebody wants to do cyber because it's completely different than from the job they're doing, what we recommend in the book is stay in the industry you're already in, but try and find a cyber job in that industry. Because one of the things we don't talk enough about in cyber is that it's not just about cyber skills, it's also about understanding the context in which you're applying those cyber skills. So if you come out of healthcare, maybe you're a nurse, or maybe you've been working in financial sector as a business analyst, for example, staying in healthcare or in finance and then looking for a job in that space is often the easiest first step into a cyber career.
And how do they do that? Is it like as simple as networking with people who are already in that space? Or are you saying like look for open job roles in the healthcare industry or in the finance industry?
Yes, both. There's nothing simple about networking right now. um, I do think if you work for a company that's big enough that it has its own cybersecurity team, that's a great place to start. Go and talk to them and say, look, you're really interested in working in cyber. They may not have a position open for you right there or even one that you're qualified for, but it could be a place where, okay, now they know you're interested. They might be able to incorporate you into activities that they're doing that aren't job aligned, like capture the flag competitions or training and awareness activities, or they might look for you to coexist with them doing a project. But it's a great place to start. So start with who you know, start with the industry you know, start with the company you know. Some of us, though, work for companies that don't have a cybersecurity team, or they don't have a cyber team that you want to work with. That happens sometimes. In those situations, I do suggest a couple of things. One is network locally. So what if you can, if there's a cyber meetup or even a technology meetup where they talk about cyber or AI things, that those are great places to go and start networking in. It can also be, okay, maybe you want to go back to school, but not as a full-time student, right? So maybe there's a professional certificate that you want to take, or you want to do your own self-paced online learning. In those environments, finding people who are similar to you, even if they're online contacts, and making the effort to reach out and become acquainted with those folks is a really good a way to network as well.
What is your advice to people who, when they ask you about what kind of technical knowledge they need? A lot of people are hesitant just to dive in because they're not sure if they could do the tech side.
Yep.
What do you tell folks who are in that area?
I tell them they need to get comfortable with tech. I know there's a lot of folks who've said, look, you can be in cyber and not be technical. And I think that's true, but I don't think you can be in the core of cyber and not be technical. There are plenty of people, for example, who do marketing for cyber or accounting for cyber or that, that kind of thing where let's call them cyber adjacent. And they start there and then they move into cyber at some later point. That's a perfectly valid path. But at its heart, cybersecurity is about resiliency and trust of our technology systems. And so at some point, you're going to need to get comfortable with understanding the technical implications of the work that you do, whatever that work is. So it doesn't mean that you've got to be able to hack your way into the Pentagon. It does mean that maybe you pick one kind of technology that you're already familiar with and get to know the cyber impact of that technology, the cyber risks, the cyber threats, and start at that technology point. So for some people, maybe they've come out of a software development background, so application security is a great place to start. Some people have worked on an IT help desk, and so they end up doing endpoint security or network security as a place to start. Some people have got none of that, and they're going to have to sort of go back to school and get comfortable with it. I will say in this day and age, if you can tilt towards cloud security, so Amazon, Google, all the big cloud providers have a lot of online training around what it means to secure a cloud environment. That's going to work in almost any business environment. So cloud security is sort of a good broad-based thing to know. Software security is a good broad-based thing to know. And these days, even browser-based security is a good broad-based thing to know. So there's lots of different kinds of tech. You don't have to know it all, but you do have to know something about something and start at that point.
For the people that you personally know that have transitioned from a complete other career into cybersecurity and who have been successful at doing so,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the characteristic traits that they had compared to other people who are still kind of stuck and still trying to get their foot in the door? What
Yeah.
have they done differently?
Well, at first, I think they have ideas of what they want, but they hold those ideas pretty loosely. So they might say, well, I want to be, I don't know, as a security engineer, and I want to work for, a big tech company. And maybe they can't find that role to start with, but they get a security engineering job at a local government agency or a county, or, they might sort of slide into it softly in some other kind of industry. Again, starting with the industry they're in. They're open to saying yes to things that they may not be comfortable actually doing. They're not waiting for the perfect job. They're just looking to get their feet wet at something, and they're willing to sort of experiment with what works for them. That's a really common thing. They tend to be people who are intellectually curious. They're not looking for a job where somebody tells them what to do. They're looking for a job where they're given the space to play around with the job and see what works and see what doesn't. So they're sort of experimenters at heart. Those kind of people do really, really well. Some people who've moved in and have done really well do so because they are really good at networking. They build themselves up a committee of mentors who give them access to different kinds of skills and advice, and they leverage those networks really, really closely. I would say anyone who's in cyber needs to do that pretty well anyway, regardless of how you get into cyber. Having a network is a career long thing that you need to do. But the people who really successfully move in and then stay leverage networks really, really well.
Yes, that was my next question, is about the networking aspect. The podcast I was listening to before we got on together literally said, like, you are not going to get a job in 2026 unless you know someone. Is that a true statement, you think?
There's never an absolute in cybersecurity. So I'm sure there's people who've gone to school, got a degree, sent out an application and got a job without knowing anybody, I'm sure. But most of the time, most of the people I know who successfully get in, stay in, move around, move up, are doing that through their informal networks. Certainly, there's a lot of, I don't think this is limited to cybersecurity. There's a lot of concern about, how successful can you really be if you're sending a resume into an organization cold through their website or through a recruiting board or those kinds of things. Typically in cyber, in particular, knowing somebody who can advocate for you to the hiring manager is a real differentiator to hiring managers who end up looking at many, many resumes and don't know what to do with them. So
Mhm.
it is a differentiator to have that network in place. Yeah.
You had mentioned AI earlier when we started our discussion,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there's so much information coming out about AI. It is a little bit overwhelming
Yeah.
on where to start.
Yeah.
For somebody switching into cyber, do they start there, or is it, hey, you need to get the basics first before you even dive into AI? Or is it you need to learn both at the same time at this point?
I would say at this point you probably need to do both, um, especially if you're just coming out of college or coming out of high school and looking to go into a role. Most hiring managers these days are going to be looking for someone who's at least comfortable with AI. Now, what does it mean to be comfortable with AI? It doesn't mean necessarily, depending on the kind of security job you're doing, it doesn't mean that you've got your own AI army working for you at home of AI agents and all those things. But I do think part of the learning curve at the moment is understanding the different kinds of AI architectures that are out there, whether it's a frontier learning model, a small learning model, what it means to have agents, what it means to have NCP servers, how the industry is talking about managing the security of AI. It's important to know that stuff. Most of that is available online from a self-paced learning perspective. You're still not going to see that necessarily in formal education places, higher ed. There are some higher ed programs that are doing that now, but they're struggling to keep up with the changes. So at the moment, the AI side, I would suggest, is very much more of a self-paced learning kind of mode. But yeah, I think there is again, what kind of cyber do you want to do? And then learning that, plus learning AI in general, but then also being able to marry the two and saying, okay, how is AI impacting the kind of cyber that I want to do? And what does that look like today is going to be part of the learning path you're going to need to have.
So we've talked a lot about switching, right? Going from one career to another career.
Yeah.
What about the people who have a college degree or they're considering going to college?
Yeah.
And it is a different time now in that I was telling somebody the other day, my kids grew up with tech,
Yeah.
literally tech in their hands, right?
Yeah.
They are going into middle school and high school. They are very comfortable with technology, like almost to, it worries me a little bit how
Yeah.
comfortable they are with technology. So, what do you say to those students who are super interested in tech? They've grown up with tech,
Yeah.
but now they're considering cybersecurity. What are some of the first steps that they would need to take?
Yeah. So I'm going to use a really bad analogy. The analogy is, just because you know how to drive a car and you're a car fanatic doesn't make you a mechanic, right? And to do cybersecurity, really what you're looking at is being the mechanic, not the driver, right? So just because people have grown up with tech doesn't make them great at cyber. They've got to, I'm going to continue a really bad analogy, they're going to need to pop the hood and understand what's underneath it and how it all fits together and how it works and what can break and what they can do to make sure it doesn't break and all of the things, right? So if they're in high school or college, do they need to have a cybersecurity degree? Not necessarily. Okay. Certainly a computer science degree is a great go-to. But I've seen people who've come out of doing just a general sort of MIS kind of degree, or a data analytics degree, or even a technology policy, like a public policy or legal program, who've gone straight into a cybersecurity job. What tends to happen is the people who get jobs are people who have, through the course of their structured learning, have taken the opportunity to do internships along the way. So I do recommend, if you're looking for a program, look for one that offers you internships for credit as part of the cyber program. Perfect, right? If you can't find one for whatever reason that does that, then making sure that you are actively looking for cyber internships during your summers or whatever. Again, expect them to be paid. I'm not expecting anyone to do one for free, but look for cyber internships during the summers. So by the time you graduate, you've got a degree with a piece of paper and you've got hands-on experience as well. Typically, those people can roll into a job easier than somebody who has only got the piece of paper. So to the extent you can look for a program that is as practical as possible, unless you want to stay at university and become, a research professor, in which case have at it. You don't need the hands-on stuff. But if you're looking for an in the industry job, hands-on experience during your degree program is really important.
I do want to mention that the younger generation who does choose the internships, that's also a huge part of networking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now they already have a network, they already have somebody to vouch for them. So that's a
That's right.
super important and valuable and smart move to make.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is your take on certifications? Because a lot of folks, we mentioned this is mainly probably more of the switching careers. they don't wanna go back to school because it's just not feasible, it's expensive, they have families, they don't have the time. So what is your take on certifications?
To be honest, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with certifications, because I think they can be oversold. But having a certification can, one, get your resume past a lot of filters, and two, can be a differentiator between you and somebody who doesn't have a certification. So I would say look at the industry certifications that are entry level certifications, and there are lots of them, but get an entry level certification because it indicates interest. It does indicate some level of aptitude. It does indicate that you can begin something and complete it. You don't have to do a boot camp, but boot camps can be a quick way to get up to speed in what's needed. But know that it's not going to make you good at your job. It might open a door for you to get an interview with a hiring manager, but they are always going to put extra weight on the job experience over the certification. On the other hand, I think if you do want to go down a self-learning path, looking at the certifications that apply to the kind of cyber job you're looking at and looking at the kinds of domains that they cover in that certification can be a way of road mapping what you need to learn in order to do that cyber job. So it can give you a roadmap of the kinds of self-paced learning that you might need to do, whether or not you end up going and getting that piece of paper and getting that certification at the end of it. It can be a useful guide.
So whether you're just starting out or you're switching careers,
Mm,
what do you think the most challenging thing is of staying in cyber?
yeah. It's If you'd have asked me 10 years ago or even 15 years ago, I would have said cyber gets no respect, particularly from the non-technology parts of a business. For the longest time, cybersecurity was seen as a back office IT kind of function. It wasn't considered to be revenue generating, and so it was never well funded. And so a lot of people who are in cyber really are committed to doing cyber really well and then getting frustrated because the organizations they're a part of don't seem to put the same value on it. And that can burn people out really, really fast. With the advent of ransomware and this growing realization in the business that actually, regardless of what the business does, they are so dependent on technology. And if technology fails, the whole business fails. And the group that keeps technology from failing is led by the security function. Now we're starting to see security become a business-wide concern, and that's a lot better than it used to be. Having said that, there is so much happening in the cyber world, it's hard to feel like you've got your arms wrapped around it. And so there is a high propensity to burn out in the cyber world because some people can't step away from the office and take a breath and have a good work-life balance. They're really, really committed and in it for a really long time. So mental health challenges in cyber are definitely something that they can be managed. There's a lot of people who have very successful, happy cybersecurity careers. And there are also people who burn out really badly. They go out flaming. And so making sure that you have enough self-awareness to know how you're managing your own stress levels is a skill that you're going to need to be successful in cyber.
So you are in a leadership role. How long have you been in a leadership role?
No, the last 15 years, maybe.
Okay, so you've been in it for a while as far as
Yeah.
being on a leadership role of cyber.
Yeah.
What is your advice for folks who are in cyber, they've managed to stay, but
Yep.
they're ready to take that next level into a leadership position? What advice would you give to them before they do that?
Yeah. It used to be leadership positions meant you were managing teams or you were managing staff. And for those people who think of leadership as staff leadership, people leadership, um, I think I make people stop and go, why do you want this kind of role? I've worked with some people who are fabulous organizational people leaders, and they're really happy and they're really good at it, but they really enjoy the people leadership part of the role. They like coaching and mentoring other people. They like resource managing, making sure that they've got people aligned to the right work at the right time, all the things that go into that. And then there are other people who take a role like that because they think that's the next logical step in their career ladder. And they realize they really don't like that part of the job. They would much rather be a deep leader in technology, which would send them down perhaps a security architect kind of leadership role, but they don't want to be a people leader. So being really clear on what kind of leader you want to be is definitely the first step. More broadly, I think the way careers in cyber work, which is almost an exact opposite of some other professions, is when you start as a junior resource, we expect you to specialize usually. We want you to get really deeply expert in a certain kind of security function or a security technology. And then as your career grows and you spend more time, you tend to generalize. So senior leaders in cybersecurity generalize across multiple systems, multiple environments, multiple vendors, the whole supply chain. Junior resources specialize. This is almost a complete flip from, say, medicine or law or accounting or whatever, right? So if you want to be a leader in cyber, you can't put your head down, stay in your lane, only do your thing, never talk to any other parts of the business, never talk to other parts of the industry. You've got to want to stick your head up, get to know everybody, start working with different kind of stakeholders. And again, that's not for everybody. So as long as you can sort of conceptualize that and understand it, if that's what you want, great, go for it. But if that's not your baby, then don't even try, because again, that's where you're going to fail. That's where you'll burn out.
So would you say then in order to be like in a leadership position in cyber, you must have very strong communication skills?
Yes. It's interesting that you bring that up. I was talking to a college professor who has been working with a lot of employers, trying to understand what employers mean by this. Yes, we need people who can write well, speak well, team build, have empathy, all of those things. But in a business context, it also means you can speak the language of the business. And the language of the business depends on the kind of business. The healthcare language is different than manufacturing, is different than finance. And so the more senior you get, yes, you need to be able to build partnerships and have difficult conversations and influence without authority and all the things. And you need to talk about security in business terms, just like the rest of your business does. And that's where a lot of leaders stumble, is they show up talking about security like security people do to non-security people, and then wonder why those non-security people's eyes glaze over and they can never get anything done. So yeah, yes, communication, but it's business communication, not just people communication.
That's a very important point, because a lot of these podcasts that I do and podcasts I listen to, they are stressing soft skills and being able to talk to people and have those tough conversations. You're one of the first people to say, okay, yes, but also business communications and knowing that those functions, or knowing your audience, I
Yeah.
guess, and who you're presenting to.
Yeah.
Helen, what inspired you to write these two books?
The first book came about, so the Navigating the Cybersecurity Career Path came about when I was the CISO for the Ohio State University. And so in that role, I was doing a lot of mentoring with students that were coming through college, but also, of course, my own teams and people who are in the industry. And at the time, I was blogging, and I was blogging about all the things that I was seeing all the time, and I wanted to write a book. And so I was like, I'm going to, instead of having to go someone buy me coffee and do this one-on-one, I want to scale my mentoring. And so I wrote the first book that way. And then the second book came about because my co-author, Josiah Dykstra, reached out to me and said, hey, I want to write this book about people transitioning into cyber from some other career, and I'd love to write it with you. And for me, the timing was perfect, because when I wrote the first book, it was before COVID, it was before AI really hit, and it was before cyber became really a focus of non-cyber people. And so the opportunity got to work with an author who's as great as Josiah and talk about workforce in this new paradigm felt really good to me too. In some ways, for me, the switching to cyber book is like version 2 of my first book in a lot of ways. So it was just great timing. And we continue to see this narrative that there are hundreds of thousands of unfilled cybersecurity jobs, and it's bumping up against the reality that people can't find cybersecurity jobs when they're trying to get into cyber at first. And so we wanted to try and explain why, one, we felt that thousands of people, thousands of open jobs was a little bit misleading, but also how do you break down some of the barriers that we were seeing people have?
Yeah, I can't leave this conversation though without asking you about layoffs.
Yeah.
And what I mean, there are a lot, hundreds,
Mm.
thousands this year of layoffs in the tech industry, not necessarily just cyber roles, right? But across the board.
Yeah.
What are you telling your friends or colleagues who have maybe been laid off? Like, what is their next step? What is your advice to them?
Yeah. This one's really personal. um, it's always frustrating when somebody gets laid off from a company, particularly when companies seem to be doing quite well. Like, I think people can intellectually understand when they see the companies start to take a dive, but when it's we're laying you off so that we can invest more over here or that kind of stuff feels really hard. Um, so the first thing is don't take it personally, because most of the time, being laid off is a business decision that is often made impersonally. So one, don't do that. Two, networks are your friend. This is why I always talk about having networks, because these are the people that you lean on when you find yourself in an emergency situation needing to find the next thing. These are the people that can tell you where they're seeing openings or where they're not seeing openings, or what they think you're strong at or what you're not strong at, so that you can present yourself in the best light to a potential hiring manager or recruiter. So always network. The third thing really is, as much as I hate to say it, when you get laid off, it's sometimes hard to think that doing the job you were doing before, but doing it somewhere else, may not exist. So you've got to be able to think really broadly about what are the skills that you bring to any role? What kinds of roles do you want to do? But target those roles, but again, hold them loosely, be open to potentially opportunities that you hadn't previously considered. I do think cybersecurity is not going anywhere, even with AI. Cybersecurity is not going anywhere. It may be changing a little bit, but it is needed by every industry, by every country, by every company. It is a fundamental piece of the way business works today. So maintain some optimism, which is really hard for cybersecurity people because our job is to look for all the bad stuff. But maintain optimism and lean on your networks.
I always like to end the shows on a positive note, Helen. So, what has been the most rewarding or greatest thing for you personally? You've been in cyber for a long time. What has
Yeah.
been the greatest thing about being a part of the cybersecurity community and your career as a
Yeah.
whole?
There's two things actually. I like working with really smart people doing really interesting work for the right for a good cause. Doesn't mean it has to be a social cause, but for an organization that's doing good things. And I've been lucky in cyber that I've been able to do that. I've been lucky to bump into people who are excellent at what they do, super smart, really making a difference in how society deals with technology and technology risk and all of the things. So that's one. But the second thing is I mentor a lot of people, and quite to my surprise, I've been doing this long enough now that I've mentored people who continue to come back every time they're looking for a new job and saying, "Hey, want you to know, here's where I am. Would you be willing to be a reference for me? Would you make a recommendation so I can go and do my master's degree? Would you, can you do those things?" Because I really respect the work that you've done, and I would like to stay in touch. And having mentors come back after 5 years or 10 years or whatever and say, "Hey, I want to stay in touch," is really great. Makes it all worthwhile.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Helen. I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Thanks for having me.
And to all of our viewers and listeners, I will put the links to Helen's book in the comment section, or both of her books in the comment section for you guys to check out. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to see you guys on the next episode.